no complaints here whatsoever, although I do have to add the disclaimer that I haven't tried this out in the live version of the game. We don't yet know if they'll stick the landing in terms of server searching functionality until it launches. It's looking like my powers of prescience are slowly returning after I just felt it in my bones that Update 11 would be awash with issues. Some of these are very understandable, the nebula overload slowing the game down to a crawl, and even issues refreshing available servers on CrimeNet strike me as problems that could only be detected in a live environment, but the botched VoIP implementation and missing paid content on PS5 is just a bridge too far to be making excuses for them. I hope, at long last, they're able to roll out a hotfix for the game, otherwise most of their content creators won't be able to play the bloody thing for the best part of a month. That's why they'll start resorting to desperate shot-in-the-dark content, like this. To be honest, I stopped being much of a Payday speculator about 18 months ago when I joined the Starbreeze Partnership Program. My take is it's disingenuous to try speculating on features you already know are coming, although the NDA means doing anything other than appearing to speculate would be deemed a breach of contract, making it best to just leave most of the guesswork at the door. However, leading into Year 2, the Partnership Program has become strangely quiet. We no longer know most of what's in the pipeline, which first had me worrying if the game had any future whatsoever. But with the recent leaks I'll touch on briefly later in this video, it's clear that Year 2 is certainly happening and should include one of the most highly demanded heists of all time, meaning partners are in the dark for less drastically concerning reasons, which I guess gives us the go-ahead to start making more 10 things I want to see videos. So thanks guys. By sharing nothing, you've made us more powerful than you can imagine, hyping up potential content way outside your design scope. This video won't be going in depth about anything that I'm fairly certain is coming, like Jacket, who I believe to be the teased paid character coming later this year, or anything around new skills or armor systems. Those are works in progress I do have some insight into, so I'm keeping my lips sealed until it's time to share the master plan. But just about everything else is fair game for only the most rampant of speculation, be that new characters, mechanics, heists, or even entire game modes. As I mentioned earlier, it wouldn't exactly be fair to speculate on First World Bank or Holdout. We don't have a date or timeline on either of those additions, but I think you can count on at least one new heist before the end of the year, so late November, early December makes the most sense to me. I think First World Bank is a perfect Payday 3 playground. Mask-Off Stealth was made with the first section of that heist in mind, and then there's always the additional challenge of Overdrill to consider, which might finally give us difficulty junkies an endgame obstacle beyond just sitting in Cook-Off for an hour. I'm truly excited for First World Bank. I just hope they're able to emphasise RNG and replayability on it, as that's the main ingredient Payday 3 has been lacking since day one. Moving into things I don't know we're getting, but would very much like to see and predict might be on the horizon, first up we have new tools and utility options. It's crazy to me that the saw was such a cool mechanic, especially in early Payday 2, yet is a completely forgotten option in Payday 3, even just as an in-heist mechanic. Back in the day, this was one of the most influential role-playing tools the game had, allowing you to be more of a utility heister, speeding up many objectives in the game in exchange for one of your ranged weapon slots. Payday 3 hates these sorts of compromises, allowing you to always be a jack of all trades, but I'm hoping Year 2 starts to bring it back, adding a saw which is properly supported by a new skill line. Whilst they're at it, I don't see why they don't double down with the classic C4 equipment, which was Bane's favourite objective option once upon a time. It's now conspicuous in its absence, which is a shame when explosions can look so good in this game, and there's clearly so much more you can do with C4 within the framework of Unreal Engine. I know this one was a balancing nightmare back in Payday 2, but surely after 10 years of development, they've figured out a way to make it work. Next up, it wouldn't be a speculation video without some sort of returning character guesses. Basically, I wouldn't expect a new original character unless it's tied to a financially lucrative crossover, so instead, Year 2 will likely dip back into the Payday 2 well for the time being. My number one guess is Sokol to finally fulfill the new Dallas prophecy, joining as an older, more established heir to the throne. I think he was massively wasted in Payday 2, arriving to make the Golden Green Casino heist happen, and then doing little else for the next 3 years, so I'd love him to finally fulfill that potential. I actually think there's room for a character like Sokol to return in a non-playable capacity, maybe as the leader of another established heisting crew who we have to assist on a future campaign, giving some context for why the gang keep robbing, even when all obstacles in the way of their continued retirement have seemingly been cleared. Having him as a pseudo-contractor who actually shows up in heists like Locke once did would be incredibly interesting. My second guess though has to be Duke. No one ever expected him to be such a popular character when released late into Payday 2's development cycle. But the combination of having one of the best perk decks in the game, a unique personality within the crew, and hard carrying the story in its final pre-White House year really won players over. He's the only ex-crewmate who we know is meant to be based in New York, so overlooking him would just seem like another narrative oversight. We need Duke, and we need an artifact or museum type of heist to get those immaculate latter year Payday vibes rolling, even if they don't go as far as calling back to the Kataru. Speaking of new heists, I think it's been widely noted that the Diamond District approach of taking a simple sandbox heist from Payday 2 and expanding it with some of the sequel's new mechanics is a surefire way to succeed. And it just so happens one of the franchise's most popular and iconic sandbox heists is yet to be adapted in the form of Shadow Raid. This has to be the most requested heist I've seen online other than First World Bank, and its potential within Payday 3 is massive. If they can figure out how to implement ladders, yes, think about it, Payday 3 has intentionally avoided using any ladders thus far, I think a Shadow Raid remake or even remaster could really hit the spot. My secondary choice for this style of more open and RNG focused heist is actually a bit of a curveball. I'm calling on the yacht heist from Payday 2, undoubtedly one of the most diverse heists in the game from one run to the next. This could be an excellent platform for easy replayability. The setting is also incredibly unique and unlike anything already in the game, with the rivers surrounding New York surely being the perfect atmospheric locations for another nighttime caper out on the water. I really believe the key to making either heist properly work in the context of Payday 3 though, given our desperate need for both loud and stealth content, would be to give them both loud variations. The way I'd look into doing this while staying true to their original vision and premise is to make loud exceptionally challenging so that stealth is heavily encouraged. Quietly, this would give us loud focus players something to really grind out, while stealth fans still receive the same sort of experience intended by the originals. Escalating from new heists to potential new game modes, my hot take is that Crime Spree would be perfect for Payday 3. I understand why Holdout has been what the team has worked on due to the innate replayability of a wave-based mode that leans heavily into what Payday 3 does fairly well, its space combat and gunplay. But hear me out on this one. I think they could do infinitely more with mutators and modifiers within the Crime Spree formula to give consecutive heists more replayability without having to actually overhaul any specific mechanics. Just playing around within the framework of the solid but often repetitive and unvaried heists we currently had, with additions like bulldozer waves or blockades to force different pathing. The sorts of things that don't necessarily need a sizable amount of dev time to create vastly different experiences between heists. Crime Spree also brings the possibility of increased difficulty beyond what we currently have in Overkill, as well as adding more risk versus reward moments to the game as you push through consecutive heists but run the risk of losing most, if not all of your payout, which was the core tenet that Payday 3 was meant to be all about. More than anything, it might just break up the monotony. I don't know about you guys, but every time I hop on just to play casually, I normally gauntlet my way through the game's heists without giving them much thought. So this would finally offer a random heist button, whilst depending on its implementation, could also give diverse builds and forgotten skills a new lease of life as specific counters to certain modifiers. My hope is that when Holdout does release, it will lean into these core tenets of extreme challenge and increased variation, but I still believe a version of Crime Spree would suit Payday 3 much better than it did Payday 2, whilst also being a cheap way to add more variety to the game. Speaking of variety, I'd be remiss not to speak on the possibility of organically adding more of that to the base game's heist. We have already seen a marked improvement in heist design and RNG post-launch when compared to what the base game offered, but it always seems to be a case of one distinct double-branched path. Do we hack the digital or physical evidence? Does Houston path to the right or left side of the building? Do we need an RFID tag or QR code? It means things are still very predictable from heist to heist. Ideally, this would be fixed via randomized heist layouts. Simple changes like vault location or loot type and quantity can add a massive amount of replayability to the game. Look no further than Big Bank or Houston Revenge. This two-path design philosophy only really caught on during the revival era of Payday 2, with the likes of Bullock's Mansion and the Ukrainian prisoner heist, which worked fine as they were the exceptions to the rule in that game. I believe more subtle yet pervasive RNG is what Payday 3 needs as a base, with no heists ever feeling exactly the same, instead of just allowing you to play the game twice before getting bored. Whilst they're at it, I'm hopeful they'll also evaluate the quality of the objectives in the game. Whilst DLC heists have avoided the infamous circle objectives like the Plague, we're still stuck trying to get some signal on 5 out of the game's first 10 heists. This isn't good enough and needs to be tweaked to make the core offering more appealing. On heists like Touch the Sky, they could feasibly be replaced by a drill or keycard, and on many others, such as Golden Shark, they're surplus to requirements entirely. If they're not going to develop these objectives to make them more interactive, at the very least in loud, they should probably extend their range to turn them into more of a holdout style requirement, instead of forcing you to stand out of cover in an arbitrary 2x2 box. Road Rage is a perfect example of how the circle style objective can be entirely inoffensive when pulled off properly, and should be the blueprint moving forward. I think Year 2 is also probably a good time to have a look back towards Payday 3's challenge and achievement systems. Obviously, the game launched with a system that was massively derided, shoehorning you into specific and unorthodox playstyles in order to level up your account. This was monotonous, unengaging, and frankly uninspired. The system of simple heist reward XP that replaced it is widely preferred by the community. But our hatred towards challenge progression was not born of a hatred of challenges themselves. The Payday community is actually notorious for being one of the most dedicated sets of achievement hunters out there, which is now an area that Payday 3 is sorely lacking in. We know there should be some hardcore challenges to unlock the Mass Mania rewards coming in the near future, but why stop there? I'd love to see weapon challenges return in a more refined fashion, potentially replacing the weapon leveling system as a way to unlock attachments. Imagine an approach where long-range kills unlock new, longer-range scopes, allowing you to lean into that playstyle further, or crouch kills unlock new suppressors. It would give us so much more to think about when putting together a build and playing around specific weapon types. I'd also like to see achievements added. Not getting any with the DLC releases was jarring after years of around 10 per update. We don't need achievement bloat, but surely there's room for another 15 to 20 individual achievements in the game at this stage, putting us at a total of 42. For reference, there are 110 on the console editions of Payday 2, so I'm not sure how far the excuse of "it's hard to add achievements on consoles" really gets you anymore. The narrative is another area of Payday 3 that has really flattered the deceive after all that promise pre-launch. The idea of botched assassination attempts bringing the gang back together worked well as an opener, but the motivations of the conspirators were never really explored, and with Shark and Garnet killed off after just 8 heists, only John Concord could save the plot and retain any intrigue around an overarching villain. But he's gone and got himself off-screened, so what the hell can save Payday 3's plot in Year 2? Which, by all narrative rights, shouldn't even exist when we know all the gang wanted at this stage was a peaceful retirement. Well, I think there are a few directions they can take it, but my number one desire is that they work harder on developing our crew's personalities. Bar none, the pre-Boys in Blue Clover and Vlad cutscene was the best bit of story content in all of Payday 3, and that's predominantly because it focused on those always entertaining character interactions and world building, filling in the gaps of Clover's actions across the years in between games. We desperately need more of that in Year 2, even if it isn't part of some insanely gripping plotline. Give us more details and motivations for the core cast of characters we get to play, to develop that affinity which has really diminished in Payday 3 with its lack of in-heist interactions. These character beats are why heists like Hoxton and Houston Breakout work so well, as they boil our actions down to easy to comprehend, emotionally motivated crimes, which instantly earns player buy-in. Going after inexplicable drone technology due to some tenuous off-screen connection makes a solid heist such as Syntax Error eminently forgettable. Had we made use of the AI sins, also stolen from that heist, it could make sense, but Payday 3's been really bad at motivating and linking heists together, which is a weakness moving into Year 2 with little to no direction. My hot take is that the focus needs to be on character moments, and to properly achieve those, the writers need to get a little braver with how they handle loose plotlines. In other words, instead of hoping Concord tops himself or stating that old crew members are unaccounted for, they need to be willing to actually kill off important characters on the spot. More realistically though, I can see the writers remaining conservative and the plot twist of Year 2 being more nostalgia bait, referencing either the dentist or Bane to finally clarify what happened at the end of the White House heist and maybe bring back some of the mystery of the Kataru plotline. We'll see, but I think it's a bloody crime that we still know so little about Bane's fate this far into the sequel. Nostalgia is going to be key once again though when it comes to weapon releases, as I'm almost positive Starbreeze are going to play it safe with some fan favourite weapons returning in year 2. The Deagle and MP5 have already gone down well, why not get a few more quick wins and possibly convince Payday 2 players to check out the game. I wouldn't be surprised if we saw something along the lines of the ISMA, Union, or hell the Gambit might even be to give us access to akimbo weapons once more. It's a key playstyle from Payday 2 that's currently missing, which makes sense given Payday 3 was conceived as a more grounded experience, but as those shackles seem to be loosening with the advent of the minigun, I don't think it would be too far-fetched to expect dual wielding, at least for pistols, to be just around the corner. Are there any other iconic weapons from Payday 2 I'm forgetting? The Thanatos might be just a little too similar to the Red Fox to make the cut, but let me know if there are any nostalgic additions you'd love to see return down in the comments. What I think would be a no-brainer to get more out of the game's current arsenal are new ammunition and damage types. We already have shock, so incendiary is almost certain to happen at some point, but I also wouldn't be surprised to see us get access to a form of damage akin to the Grenadier's gas. It would be exceptionally cool if the Piglet grenade launcher could fire these damage types depending on how you modify it, giving it far greater viability as it's now so clearly the worst of the 3 overkill options. I'd also love to see ammo types for all weapons, meaning we could obviously expect the return of slug, flechette and dragon's breath rounds for shotguns, but what about high velocity, armor penetrating or frangible rounds, giving all weapons in the game unique specializations, granting different pros and cons versus each enemy type. This would be a cheap and easy way to add a lot of weapon variety to the game without needing to create dozens of expensive new models, getting more out of the game's assets we already have. Finally for this video, I promised myself I'd do at least one slightly off the wall or long odds prediction, so here goes. At first I want to suggest we get another Payday Con in 2025, but I just don't think that could be financially condoned given the tight budgets and production costs of Baxter. So instead, I'm going out on a limb and saying that we get some sort of early trailer or pilot episode for that live action Payday series that was supposedly entering the early production phase last year, led by the studio Stockholm Syndrome. With all the changes at Starbreeze over the past year and the CEO moving on, there's no guarantee this kind of franchise expansion is still on the cards, but I'm assuming the recent success of video game to TV adaptations has left the team salivating at the prospect. Cyberpunk did tremendously well off the back of its series after a shaky launch, so with that case study in mind and how well Payday evidently lends itself to the live action medium, I wouldn't be surprised if this was still moving forwards just in the background. Hopefully we hear more over the course of year 2, but I can't imagine Payday 3's disastrous launch has done wonders for the series' prospects, hence why this prediction feels like such a long shot. And that's it, 10 Payday 3 predictions for year 2. Once again, I have to thank you all for the support on recent videos. My request to like and comment made a truly substantial difference last time around, so doing likewise today if you wouldn't mind. It does wonders for signal boosting this type of video with so many lapsed Payday players. Thanks for watching, take care, check out my PC sponsor, Apex Gaming PCs, if you haven't already. Discounts tend to be pretty solid around this time of the year, and I'll see you all very soon in the next video. A huge thank you to my dedicated Patreon backers. If you want to join this crew in going infamous, check out the link below and pledge as little as $2 to see your name in the credits, or get 24-hour early access to future videos and vote on upcoming content. Take care, I'll see you all soon.